You know, the video, I'm sure you're going to remember when you first saw it because it shocked most of the nation when it came to light. Police pulling up to 12-year-old Tamir Rice. This is in a Cleveland park. One officer drawing his weapon and firing, and within 2 seconds of arrival, all of this happened. Someone had called 911, remember, reporting a guy with a pistol. Now that officers' actions are being called tragic, reasonable, and justified in two newly released expert reports about Rice's death. Nick Valencia is following this story. What exactly did this report find, Nick?
Good morning, Christy. These reports, 2 of 3 reports released last night, independent of the Cuyahoga County prosecutors. They actually commissioned these reports as they prepare to bring their findings towards the grand jury. These 2 independent reports concluding that the shooting death of 12-year-old Tamir Rice was a reasonable one. One of these reports done by a chief deputy in the Denver area, a prosecutor in the Denver area, S. Lamar Sims, and they concluded in their report that Officer Lohman, of course, he's that officer that fired that fatal shot towards Tamir Rice, that Officer Lohman's belief that Rice posed a threat of serious physical harm or death was objectively reasonable, as was his response to that perceived threat. Let's take you back to November 22nd, that night there in the Cleveland area in Ohio. It was about 3 p.m. when 911 received a call about a guy at a recreation center pointing a pistol at people. That caller also telling 911 dispatch that the individual was probably a juvenile and the gun was probably fake. Going off the information that they had when police arrived at the scene, within 2 seconds they opened fire, fatally shooting 12-year-old Tamir Rice as he reached towards the right side of his waistband. These reports saying that that was enough of a perceived threat to justify the shooting. Now again, this is not about whether it was right or wrong of the officers according to this report, just about whether or not it was objectively reasonable that they did this. It turns out, of course, that Tamir Rice was 12 years old and that gun turned out to be a fake. Writing in their report, this is a former FBI agent who was one of those that released this report last night, saying that the weapon in question was an airsoft gun is not relevant to a constitutional review of Officer Lohman's actions. Of course, ultimately, it's going to be a grand jury that decides whether or not to bring criminal charges against the officers involved in this shooting. We are hearing as well from the family attorney of Tamir Rice releasing a long, lengthy statement to the media. Part of that reading, to get so-called experts to assist in the whitewash when this world has seen the video of what happened is all the more alarming. Goes on to say these hired guns, all pro-police, talking about those that wrote these reports, dodged the simple fact that the officers rushed Tamir and shot him immediately without assessing the situation in the least. Certainly dramatic video. It's a story that captured the nation's attention and one that we will continue to be following as these grand jury proceedings continue. Victor, Christy.
All right. Hey, Nick Valencia, thank you so much for breaking it down for us.
You bet.
All right, let's talk more about these reports and the legal case ahead. CNN law enforcement analyst, former FBI Assistant Director Tom Fuentes with us, and HLN legal analyst and criminal defense attorney Joey Jackson with us.
Let's be real clear. If you can't check your fear for more than 2 seconds and you kill a 12-year-old playing in the park with a toy because you were afraid, because you felt threatened, your life felt threatened. When don't you cops feel threatened? If you put yourself in harm's way, you chose to do this. Do you choose to do it so that you could murder 12-year-olds in the park playing? You're supposed to make the parks safer for the kids so they can go and play there. Instead, you make it a murder ground. You make it unsafe. You, police officers, make it unsafe. Because, let's be clear, these fucking pieces of garbage, piece of shit fucking garbage, said that you're justified in shooting children in the park. That's what your independent analyst just said about this shooting. That you're justified to shoot little children playing in the park. Is that really the way you cops want to be seen? As justified in shooting little children? 2 seconds after you wind up on the scene of a child playing with a toy in the park, you murder him, and you want to know, you want a whole entire public to know that that's okay, that you did that. You guys can't stand up and say, no, this isn't okay. No, that's not right. No, we don't want people like this on the force. People who aren't able to check their fucking fear for 2 fucking seconds. Okay? Let's be real clear. It is possible to do this. It is possible to put your fear in check and deal with the situation. I mean, here, watch this. Watch this cops put their fear in check.
We turn now to stunning new police video from a body cam. The view we rarely see. Police in Cleveland answering a call, heading up this staircase, coming face to face with an armed man, ordering him to put down the gun. Instead, firing at the police officer. The officer wearing that camera is shot. ABC's Matt Gutman reports he does survive this, and tonight, what that camera captured next.
Tonight, police body camera showing the harrowing moments 6 officers respond to a domestic violence call. An officer shot by 64-year-old Theodore Johnson. But watch as that same cop, unhurt, still tries to reason with Johnson.
Put the gun down and shoot me. No, we're not going to shoot you, Dad. Why don't you do that, ass Spencer? I know you shot me, but I'm not going to shoot you.
When Johnson raises his gun, the officers shoot, killing him. After an investigation, that body camera video cleared them. Cases like these have sent sales of police body cameras surging.
All right? These cops not only know the guy's got a gun, not only know that it's loaded, not only know that he's willing to shoot at them, they know that one of them has already been shot by him. And they check their fear. They put themselves in harm's way to try and protect this guy's life who's already shot at the cops. They're not protecting the neighbor's life. I don't think there was anybody else in the place with him. They're just dealing with him. And they checked their fear. And they said, look, man, we don't want to have to kill you. And then he decided that that's what he wanted, for them to kill him. Okay, all he had to do was drop the gun. They gave him a chance. This little kid playing in the park didn't even get the chance to drop his toy gun, his airsoft gun. Do you know what an airsoft gun is? It shoots little plastic BBs. Couldn't hurt you. Couldn't put an eye out. You could shoot them up your nose. It wouldn't hurt you. And they murdered him. They're supposed to make it safe for little children to play in the park. And you murdered him, and then you say it's justified. Then you stand up. This is all you cops. All you cops are now saying, and I don't care, unless you stand up and you make it known. No, it wasn't justified. No. You need to make it known. No, this is not who we are. We don't shoot 12-year-olds 2 seconds after we get on the scene because we felt threatened. You need to check your fear, or you need to turn in your weapon. Because you got no business on the street with a weapon. If anybody else had pulled up and 2 seconds later shot this kid, shot a 12-year-old playing with a toy, no bodies laying anywhere, no blood, no reports of gunfire, just shot the kid dead, playing in the park. Anybody else had done that, they'd be sitting in an electric chair, or at least a prison cell. These cops who did this, they should know fear. They should be put in Rikers prison in the general population. You want to know fear? You want to know fear, you fucking punk-ass nothings, low-life scummag? And I have a theory as to why cops are so chicken shit. Why people like this? You know, the ones who dealt with the guy with the gun clearly weren't chicken shit. Very, very police, very, 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 very brave men who did a very, very professional job of executing that fucking idiot who was high or on whatever. You know, they did an extremely professional job, extremely hard, extremely professional job. The people who executed that child, These are not people that we want to associate as cops. Why can't you cops see that? Why can't you stand up and say, no, this is not who we are, and when these people are not ever going to be allowed to be a cop again or even get a gun permit again? Because clearly they shouldn't have a gun. Just check your fear. You want my theory on why cops are so chicken? Because 85% of them, 80%, somewhere in there, will claim that they're Christians. And they know that if they get a little scratch on their hand, that it might get infected and they might die. That's what they're afraid of. They're afraid they're going to get a scratch. That's what they're really afraid of. Not these cops in the video, but the ones who say, oh, I was so frightened I had to execute this unarmed person. What they're afraid of is that they're going to get a scratch and they'll get infected and they'll die. And then they have to explain why they're such a piece of garbage. Because if they claim Christian, then they know that there's going to be a Day of Atonement where they have to explain what it is they did, and that they can't explain it. They know that they're dirty. They know they're bad cops. They know they're shitty human beings. And so do the rest of you cops. And instead of pointing them out and separating the weakest link from the herd, you rally around them and say, no, they were justified in murdering a 12-year-old in the park. And you wonder why people don't trust the cops anymore. You wonder why people don't like cops anymore. Because you're murdering our children. You're ruining our children's lives every single day. You know you're going to go out and ruin someone's family, someone's life tomorrow, and then you just get up and do it the next day and get it and do it the next day. That's who you've become. And it needs to change. It has to change. And the shit where you say that it's justified, that says, not going to change. We're going to murder every fucking 12-year-old we want, and we're going to call it justified. Respect my authority, or get fucking murdered. Have your life ruined. Right? That's the way it is when you're the biggest bully on the block. Right, cops? Can't be heroes. Bullies are never heroes. You guys have chosen to be the biggest bullies on the block, haven't you? You've chosen to make it clear that you're the biggest bullies on the block, haven't you? Bullies are never heroes. All right, I'm checking out. Thank you. I just had to say that. And thank you for your continued support. Wednesday, this war is going to end. Stay cool till that day.
It down for us.
You bet.
All right, let's talk more about these reports and the legal case ahead. CNN law enforcement analyst, former FBI Assistant Director Tom Fuentes with us, and HLN legal analyst and criminal defense attorney Joey Jackson with us as well. And Nick just went over the facts of this case. No need for us to rehash. I want to go specifically, though, to a quote from the report to you, Tom, first, in which they say that Officer Lohman's belief that Rice posed a serious threat, physical harm or death, was objectively reasonable, and that his response to that perceived threat was as well. Your response to that?
Well, I think the difficulty here, Victor, is it's hard to argue what an officer might believe when he gets there. The video looks bad, and in hindsight, we know it was not a real gun, and he was 12 years old. The victim, Tamir, was 12 years old. But that's not what the officers know when they arrive at the scene. They're getting dispatched. The dispatcher didn't relay all of the information that was in the call to them. And so the officer, all they know is they have a subject with a gun, and when they arrive, it appears that that's true, that they have a subject with a gun. And, you know, when someone reaches in and someone draws a gun, there's not a lot of time for detailed assessment. These are split-second decisions. And I think that that's what was happening here. What's unusual about this case is the prosecutor's office saying normally a grand jury proceeding, an investigation is supposed to be secret, but we're going to open this wide open and make at least some of the investigation transparent. So here you have two independent bodies, the prosecutor and the former FBI legal instructor, doing a report on behalf of the prosecutor to see what they say, and they're applying the strict legal interpretation that was it reasonable for the officer to fear being possibly shot with a person with a gun.
Yeah, Joey, how about those two elements? I mean, we've seen recently over the last 18 months as it relates to police shooting some unorthodox methods as it relates to these grand juries proceedings. And what will be the role of these reports in the grand jury process?
Absolutely. Good morning, Victor. Good morning, Tom. You know, two important things to consider, and that's the first that you mentioned, is the grand jury. These are reports, and as a result of that, they'll go before the grand jury, and grand jurors will have a number of questions in terms of the reasonableness of the officer's actions, what specifically occurred, what the constitutional and legal requirements are. And remember, in a grand jury, they're not there, Victor, to determine guilt or innocence. They're merely there to determine whether there's reasonable cause to believe that a crime was committed, and did these officers, Lohman, who shot, or Grombach, the one who's the driver, did they commit any types of crime? And it's not unanimous decision, it's a majority of the grand jurors. And so, yes, they'll hear information in terms of, experts testifying before them, what were the procedures, what were the protocols. And the second issue to keep in mind is that we're talking about reports of experts. And being in this field for a long time, I can tell you that you can get an expert virtually to corroborate, whatever point you're looking to establish. And so there will be varying points, I think, that'll be brought forward.
Let me jump in here because we want to read something from the attorney who represents the family that says any presentation to a grand jury without the prosecutor advocating for Tamir, as prosecutors do for crime victims every day, is a charade. And I want to jump into that point because you said that you can get an expert to say anything. We should expect that the family's attorneys then will hire their own expert to argue the inverse of this.
Well, the problem is that you don't, as a particular victim's attorney, you don't have the opportunity to go before the grand jury.
No
a grand
role in
jury
this process,
can decide whoever they want to hear from, and so you don't necessarily get to go in there. Now, at the time of trial, certainly there will be people who will be combating these reports. And, as lawyers, what happens is we don't argue what the law is, right? That's not where we make our living. That's what legislatures do. They create the law. But what you make arguments is on the facts. And I think the facts will be, were the officer's conduct reasonable? What do the procedures underlying responding to a dispute say? Do you keep a safe distance? Do you keep cover? Do you have a duty to warn? What specifically do the procedures in that locality say? And looking at the reports, they were absent. I didn't see anything about the protocols pertaining to officers, only generic statements regarding whether the officers acted reasonably. In these reports, they concluded they did. But the other issue, Victor, will be not necessarily were the officers' actions intentional. Officers are there to protect and preserve life, of course. But was there some negligence involved? Did they fail to perceive a risk that something like this can happen? Were they reckless? Did they consciously disregard the risk?
Okay.
So all of those things, I think, will go before a grand jury.
Quickly to you, Tom. One of the findings in one of these reports was that it's irrelevant that this was an airsoft gun and not a gun that is traditionally more lethal. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I faced that myself on 2 occasions when I was a street police officer. These guns look, you can be an expert, and I was a firearm instructor, and from 10 feet away, you can't tell that it's not a real gun. So what they're basically saying in the reports, I read that also, is that that's not relevant if the gun looks like it's real and it's reasonable for an officer to suspect that it might be real. That's all you have to have in that case. And it also, they went on to say about Tamir's age, that a 12-year-old can pull the trigger on a real gun and kill people, and it happens all the time, unfortunately, on many of our city streets in this country. So I think that that's the part of it that's so, I guess, heartbreaking, is everybody in hindsight knows it was a 12-year-old boy and it was not a real gun. But the question is, what did the officers know or reasonably know reasonably believe at the time when they instantly faced that situation.
And there have been many
And
concerns
were the
about
steps that they took appropriate in light of that?
And many
No,
concerns
exactly right.
that have been
Joey's right.
relayed about what information was relayed from the dispatcher to the officers when they got to the scene. How much did they know based on what that initial 911 caller provided? Joey Jackson, Tom Fuentes, thank you both.
Thank you, Victor.
Thank you,
Take
Victor.
care, Tom.
Sure.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.